Hey, welcome back to the table. We are so honored to have you here. And today we have a guest.
Hey.
You want to introduce yourself, guest?
My name is David Hopper.
Thank you. And
that should be enough.
That's everybody knows that, right? So, okay, we got it. We went for the famous guest.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
We went for someone who's kind of reputable.
And the good-looking guy on my right is...
My name's Nick. It's good to be here again.
Okay.
That doesn't put me on the spot at all.
No, not at all. So the reason we've invited Dave here, he had a great question. And I think it's one that all of us probably need to ask ourselves more than once in a day. And it's about how I'm engaging other people. Am I being authentic, or do I have an agenda? Right?
Right. Yeah.
How would you put that?
How would you put it?
Well, I mean, I think I'm actually a pretty selfish person, and I love being with my family, and I want to be at home playing video games and just living my life. But I feel like God's called me here to do something far more, and that's to share Jesus Christ every day until I get to be in heaven. And so I spend all of my life, at least I have mandated to myself, to be someone that's going to be advancing the kingdom of God. Having said that, there is sometimes when I think, am I authentically looking for conversation and friendship, or do I have an agenda that drives me? And in my back of my mind, I have an agenda that's driving me, that I want you to know Jesus for your own sake. And I love you, but I love you because Jesus loves you.
Well, let me ask you two a question. Let's talk about agenda a minute.
Yeah.
Dave, you just said that, when you feel like you've got an agenda, that's not a good thing. What's wrong with having an agenda?
Well, I'm not so sure that having an agenda is bad in itself, because we all have an agenda. Even if we're trying not to have an agenda, we're having an agenda in a way. But I think what we're really hinting at is not just having no aim. We're talking about utilizing a relationship to get somebody to some place in their thinking, and that's it.
Yeah.
And what could be wrong with that, I think, could be, okay, this actually isn't relational. It's actually a transaction.
Or a manipulation.
Or even, and in some cases, probably manipulative. In other words,
I think what the secular audience, whoever's watching, I don't know, would say is, you want to get us to church so that you can tithe and then serve. And that's what they're probably thinking. That's not what I'm saying, because I have no, I do go to a church, but I'm not trying to get you somewhere. I'm trying to get you into a relationship with Jesus Christ. So it's interesting to think of it as a pastor versus like what you're doing, right? Because you aren't really trying to get them to something like that, as opposed to a pastor, which I have been many times. And still am. And they could probably feel like I'm just trying to get them to my church, to tithe, to serve, and do those things. So that might be the crux of the agenda being something perceived in a way that it really is not the way I mean it to be.
Well, I still want to pursue this. I think I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important question, but I think for us to really wrestle with that. You said a minute ago that agendas aren't a bad thing.
in themselves.
I'm not sure that's always true.
Oh, it's not always true.
Okay.
Sometimes there are bad agendas.
So I think it's worthwhile. I think to answer your question, we really need to sit for a second on that question of agendas. When is an agenda? I mean, let me put it this way. Can you think of a time when you knew, both of you, just a 30-second answer, what was the circumstance where you knew the person had an agenda with you? You were not the subject.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? You were not the subject. You were the object.
Yeah, like every time I go to any store, right? If I walk on a car dealership, he's trying to be my buddy, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's happening everywhere all day. That's why I think people are saying the same thing about us. As a pastor, okay, what's your agenda? because that's what happens to us.
Okay, so car dealership.
I'm thinking of the BJ's instead at the BJ's Pizzeria when we were invited to like this
Oh,
conversation. We were invited to this conversation where we were getting a free lunch, hopefully to connect
be
with this
generic.
pastor.
Be generic.
And we'll be very generic for the sake of everyone involved. And we were going to eat this pizza, and that's what I thought. We were going to get to know these pastors. But in reality, it was like, all right, guys, like let's get all these other pastors in. And we're here to tell you about our vision. And all right, guys, who's giving? There's a matching grant, like right now. And it was like, I was like, I walked out and I told you, I was like, I feel like we just got like sold something. I didn't like the pizza as much after that. So yeah,
So that's a case where the table wasn't enough to mitigate
the table wasn't about the conversation. It was
Okay.
about the money.
Okay.
So
I've been in a few of those. I've been to a conference like that where the first meeting was this whole thing about giving. And I'm like, I haven't even heard a speaker yet. I don't even know, like, I want to know about this conference. And it was like, you guys need to be giving. And it just went on and on and on, like long. And then had someone come on a piano and play behind them as they talked.
Okay. But wait.
I'm
You
not
guys
going too far.
No. Not too far, but too high, because you're talking about kind of group.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're
I'm
talking
talking
individual.
about individual.
Mhm.
Like, for example, I'm having trouble coming up with a precise moment. But no, that's not true. When we were living in Guatemala, I was in immigration one time, and this guy started to engage me, and we had a little chat, and he didn't know that I spoke Spanish really well.
This would be good.
And so, we're talking. He's like, "Oh yeah, I want you. You're a nice guy, blah blah blah." And I'm thinking, "Oh, cool. I'm new in the country. This is great." And then he runs into somebody, and they said, "Who's your friend?" And he's go, "I just met this guy. I'm thinking," and this is all in Spanish. And he says, "I'm thinking this guy can set me up." And he used a different expression, not a bad one, but he used a slang expression that he wouldn't have assumed I would understand, but I did. And so now I'm like, man, I thought I was having a real conversation with this guy, and he really just wants to use me. You know,
the white American.
Yeah, but it's that was a personal encounter. So it's like,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I feel like there's going to be a relationship here, and then it's like, there's not going to be a relationship.
Oh, it was conditional.
It's totally conditional.
Yeah.
And and I was really bummed because he seemed like a nice guy, and that's more. I'd like to keep it down on that level, because I think that's where you.
Yeah. How do we not give off that persona, and really be authentic in our care for people?
It's a really good question. I do have something coming to my mind.
Okay.
I could share. I have a friend of mine that I've shared a lot about Jesus with. I worked with him and always got along with him super well. And, there came a point in our conversations where he was like, I'm just not interested in that. And so I kind of had to ask myself, like, where do I go from here? I'm like, it became really clear that he needed some help in other areas. And so we pivoted and started talking about other things in his life. And what became clear to me as I was doing that was that, okay, so the bottom agenda was like, I want to be for this person. And I know that what it means to be for this person means to want them to have God in their life. But I also know that they may not want that. But how can I still be for that person and serve them and be a representative of Jesus to them outside of that? And so I think service is a big part of that, of just, you know what, my agenda with you is to literally bless you. And I think the gospel is like the biggest blessing. Maybe you're not there yet. And maybe what it looks like to be for you, have a good agenda, is to serve you. I think of that. That was an indication that came to my head.
What about you?
It looked like.
Answering my own question.
Yeah. In coaching, they say that you have the answer to your question.
You just have to.
It's very Socratic.
Yeah.
Pull it out.
Yeah, I would hope, and this is something I have to check myself all the time, in that my authenticity is I actually do care about you. And like you're saying, my biggest care is your eternal salvation. And I think that's where people don't understand me in general is, no, I literally believe, I really, really believe in what I'm selling, if you want to say it that way, or if I'm preaching, I really do believe in it. Therefore, if I really believe in it, to not share it with you would be the most awful thing I could do for you, because this is your eternal salvation. And sometimes I feel like people don't understand the gravity of that, because by someone not sharing eternal salvation with you, not telling you that there is an afterlife, there really is a place. And it does matter what you do in this life, what happens in the next, like it all matters. And to not tell you that would be the worst friend, or the worst, like if you found out that they knew and they never told you.
But what if, I think that where the agenda thing comes in is, but what if they're not looking for that now?
Yeah, what if they reject it?
And I think that's where the difference between the pursuit of an agenda and the pursuit of a relationship enters in. This is actually,
I like that.
Today is the anniversary of the. I wasn't going to. Okay, today's the anniversary of the day we lost our grandson back in 2008, and this was not supposed to be part of this conversation, but what happened in that, we were in Denver for weeks while our daughter was in the hospital and recovering. And about day 3, a woman was walking behind Barbara and Scott's mom, and overheard them wondering where they should go for a meal. And she said, "Oh, my dad has a great restaurant." And told him about it. And we ended up going there for lunch. And there was a bunch, it was the family, right? We'd all we were all camped out there in Colorado. And Benito was the owner of this Italian restaurant. And we came in, sat down, he asked, what are you here for? And we said, why? And, their accident was kind of a big news item out there. And he's like, "Oh, you're that family." And he served us this amazing spread. And he said, "I'm not charging you." And we're like, "No, you have to." And he's like, "No, I'm not." Wow. And he says, "And you're going to eat every day in my restaurant, and I'm not going to charge you."
Wow.
That's about as agenda-free, not a follower of Jesus, but that's like the most agenda-free expression I've ever had, right? And over those weeks, the next, whatever it was, 5 weeks, ate there every day. We became friends. And actually, faith became a conversation for us, and it went in a really cool direction from my perspective. He chose to become a follower, but it was not out of any intention. It was just, a guy that felt sorry for us and loved on us, agenda free. And I would like to think that I could be that way,
right?
That if there's a need somebody has, that I could respond to that need.
Yeah.
And yes, I give them the thing I value most, but be comfortable with letting things go in their time and still being for them. I really like that that phrase. I don't know. That's what.
Yeah. No. It almost.
That's what comes to my mind between agenda and relationship.
Well, when you said too, like we don't chase after people. Like when I first was learning how to share Jesus, and you were telling me, you're like, "Nick, don't try to chase people that aren't interested, because you're chasing them away." just be for like you. I think I learned that from you about being for people, and I see that in the way Jesus lived his life is like there's a lot of people who said no, and his
Right.
whole thing wasn't to like beg them to stay or threaten them with damnation. He was just like, okay, who's staying? You know, like remember when you think of John 6 and all the disciples like leave because of the hard saying, and Jesus goes, so are you guys going to go too? And it's an open question. Like they could have said no, and they could have left. But I think something that Peter says instructive. He said, we have come to know and believe. Know and believe. Like an intimate word, know. We've come to know you and believe that you are who you say you are. And it's that relationship that they had, I think, that allowed them to stay open. Because sometimes people don't want what we have right now. But if we keep sharing and loving them genuinely because God loves them.
Well, they may not want that conversation,
Right.
but they are longing for relationship.
Right, they are.
And I, I think you're probably right. Agendas aren't always
No.
wrong. You need to, I have an agenda with my grandchildren that they will learn not to cross the
Right.
street without
Totally.
looking, right?
Yeah, we all have an agenda.
I have a teaching agenda there.
Yeah.
But what I think is at the core of it is, you had used the word when we were talking, authenticity. And I think if you're for me authentically and you don't have an expectation on my response, that's where trust is going to come in. Because I know, does that make sense?
I think so.
And
yeah.
that's when you can have a real relationship, and it may transcend a conversation or
Yeah.
10 conversations and
Yeah.
or even 10 years if that's the case, because you're not just pressing somebody to give in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also would say, and this is against me, but like the gentleman who served you and had no agenda, and you didn't know if he was a Christian. He was doing it because he saw a
need.
I don't even want to say a need, because you didn't need it. You had money, but he wanted to serve you in your time of
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
love
so that's where I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I'm like that. Now, the hard part for me is telling you about Jesus is the greatest gift I could give you. So that's where I'm struggling with this question. But putting that aside for a moment, I don't know if I'm like that guy. And I want to be more like that guy who just saw them in pain and said, okay, how can I do something for them?
Yeah.
Food.
Yeah.
I want to be like that.
Totally. Yeah. No,
So-
that's what it means to be like Jesus. I mean, he fed the 5,000 and then they're like, he said, you came back not because you heard what I said, but because you ate and were filled. Or the man who was totally mean to him at the pool of Bethesda in John 5, he heals him and he doesn't tell him anything. Like later on, he has to tell him, I'm Jesus. But he just healed him. He saw where he was at and he made a decision. I'm going after this person to love them, to bless them. To
That's
be
a
for
good
them.
example, because he does that quite often where he just heals.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of the one where, was it, I don't remember where it was, but then only one came
The
back.
10 lepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 10 lepers.
And he was a Samaritan.
And the only one that came back, he's like, well, this is why I did it. The others missed out because they just got the healing.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's a sermon there.
Yeah. Oh, totally. There's
Downward.
Yeah. But I think that's what we're kind of saying is to have an agenda is not a malicious thing. I think the way we talk about, like the way we experience that word.
Yeah,
Has
and the way
negative
we've seen
connotations.
Christians, even in the last year, the way that they are pushing certain things, I'm like, no one's feeling your love. You're just, and I get your heart of what you're trying to do, but it's sounding painful.
So the consensus then is that if an agenda is going to be legitimate, it actually has to be informed by the pursuit of relationship.
Yeah. And in line
Right.
with Jesus. It has to be in line with that.
And then that's what that love for the person is what gives the conversation authenticity.
Mm.
And the love has to transcend whatever the response is. And, we see that in the life of Jesus. You see that in the life of your family, right? I mean, do your kids always do what you want them to do? No. Do you, turn them out the door? No, you just keep loving them and hoping for better responses.
I want to.
maybe they are outside.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to kind of sum that up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
I'm
was,
glad we solved this.
well,
We solved the world
thank
hunger.
you. Yeah.
No, but it's a good step though, because I think, Dave, like your desire to share Jesus with people is admirable. I wish more people were willing to just throw that down, and do that. But I think on our journey to become like Jesus, your question is so fitting. And so it's something we just need to chew on and consider, maybe to reflect a little bit on the way we do relationships.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking for our next episode, maybe we should talk about listening, because key to authentic relationship is listening first, right? Being willing to understand or to understand before you seek to be understood. So please send your questions. We want to keep dealing with other people's questions. And next week next time we'll be talking about, please not we will be, we'll explore listening some, but we want to hear other questions that we can engage as well.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much, Dave.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
On the
good.
show. Like
So
such a
much.
great question, dude.
Thanks.
I'm going to
Dude.
be chewing on this for a week
Yeah.
at least. So send in your questions. We want to keep the
And where do
conversation
they write to?
They write to connect@northcountyproject.org if you are listening on Spotify or iTunes, or if you want to on YouTube. But you can always drop us a comment in the comment section there, and feel free to like and subscribe to our videos so that we can continue the conversation and so that we can continue hanging out at the table together. Thank you again so much, and we look forward to the next time when we can all grab a chair.
Absolutely.